All right. Hello. Good day, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are. All right. So let's see that everything is working. Yeah, let's put here this. All right. So see, this is the very first time I'm doing something of the kind. I apologize in advance if there is any technical issues or if for some reason nothing happened at the end. That would be such anticlimactic. But it shouldn't be the case. Everything should be should work. So yeah, we'll see. Carnivores, Yo-Yo, Miguel, how it's going? Well, doing pretty well. How about you? Welcome. Thanks for joining. And yeah, I'm pretty excited. Um, I yeah, very excited about this. I don't know if you are if you follow me on my normal streams, but or on my social media anyway. But yeah, this has been on the making for a very long time, and it started as a basic idea where I was seeing a lot of people struggling to paint Space Marines, and I thought, yeah, maybe I should give some to do a very small video giving some few tips for people to have in mind and to consider. And what started initially like that has became like a 4 episodes long tutorial, and each episode pretty long. So yeah, so it's been half an a year of hard work and love put into it. To be fair, I mean, aside from the fact that yes, it has been a lot of work. It is a lot of content and a lot of experience and knowledge condensed into all these episodes. But still, I mean, it has been stretched for such a long time because I'm so busy. So I had basically to do it during my spare time, and it hasn't been that much. So that's why that has been a factor that has play a big part into taking this long. And it hasn't been easy, I have to say. For some time, I thought that I should perhaps just give up because nobody would give a damn about it, and I was just like spending so much time and effort, and it felt that I had so much on in front of me. So yeah. So the fact that we are here, that everything is done, it's ready for release, the first episode. I feel fantastic. It is such a feel of accomplishment, not because anything special. I mean, regardless if it is good or bad, it's just the fact that it's done. Now I can go to sleep and and be relaxed about it. Regardless if you at the end you think it's just crap, it wouldn't matter. I will still feel very happy that I just finished it. So yeah. Seb, hello Miguel. Uh, Hello man. Welcome to the stream. How are you doing? Carnivores, yes. Alex, yes. How are you doing there, man? How 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 long have you been there? I remember last time you were on the stream, you were mentioning that you were going, but yeah. Project Tangriman, thanks for the subscription. Thank you. Um, so yeah, how is it going? That must have been quite a big move and and I'm sure it's quite an adventure. Dinob, Wiz, hello, hello, welcome. Felipe, hi, how are you doing? Juan Toledano, hello, Juan Toledano, it's in the house. Well, I would appreciate if everybody on the chat just give a round of applause for Juan Toledano, because he has been one of the people that have contributed to this tutorial series by doing not the very little amount of work of making the subtitles for Spanish. So yeah, Juan, yes, you rock, man. Thanks a lot. Yeah, it's the subtitles is one of those things that you might take for granted, but it takes it takes quite some time to do, and to do properly. There you go. Carnivores. I have been here for about 6 months now. I'm actually working at Ubisoft. They have a studio in Sydney. Oh, nice. Nice. And well, 6 months now. So that's quite some time already. Do you feel settled, or still like trying to find your place? I mean, not literally, but you know, it is an easy place to just just to settle, or I guess it must be. That's my wild guess. I've never been to Australia, but I my guess is that it must be quite easy. All right, so 20 minutes to go. So, for those of you that don't know, so all right, so this tutorial, the video that is going to be released today, it is the very first one of a series of episodes. So the full tutorial, it's going to be composed of 4 episodes, right? So in this one, you are going to be looking at the anatomy of space marines and proportions, and a subject that might not in the first glance appear to be such a relevant thing, especially if but I just want to paint space marines, why should I care about lore? So I dedicate one chapter of this episode to talk about lore, not in terms of learning who the space marines are for the sake of knowing, but just because it's an extremely important thing to take in consideration in any type of subject when you are trying to illustrate it. And it might be one of these chapters that might be a little bit controversial for some people in the public, perhaps, because of course this is a very subjective point of view. But yeah, the reason for putting this on the tutorial was that I see a lot of people struggling, really grasping the true nature and narrative spirits of Space Marines within the Warhammer 40k verse, and and in order to do a good depiction, it is important to understand that aspect. So yeah, that is why. So this is the first episode. This is what we are you are gonna be watching today. The second episode is gonna be dedicated to the volumes of the Space Marine armor, and and trying to understand how they are made, and to see them in different angles, right? So to get a grasp and understanding on the 3D aspect or feeling of the volumes of the Space Marine armor, one of the trickiest aspects of it. And the second part of the second episode will be dedicated to dynamic posing for Space Marines. Carnivores. Yeah, I feel very settled here now. Almost feel like home. It's not too different from the UK culture wise, so it was easy to get into life here. Yeah, I can imagine. Nice. Well, I'm very happy for you, man. And Ubisoft is overall is a good company to be working for. So nice, man. Congratulations, and very happy for you that that you have found your place and path. So that is fantastic. I still can remember the first time we met back in, when was it? Well, quite some time ago on the conference in Frankfurt, and you were just trying to to find a place and see how to move forward, etc., etc. So yeah, fantastic to see that, man. Very happy for you. Yeah, 2017. Yeah, that's quite a long time. Yeah, 5 years. It feels that, I would say it feels like it could be longer, to be honest. But no, actually, you might be right. Yes, I think you are right. Actually, yes. Yes, of course. So, all right. So, as I was saying, the second episode will be for volumes of the Space Marine armor and dynamic posing for Space Marines, if I recall correctly. Then the third episode will be dedicated to um, doing portraits for Space Marines. So, focusing on their faces, heads, and how to portray them in a good way, and how to add personality, etc., etc. And also about the anatomy, very important, of the face. So yeah, it will be a full chapter dedicated, or episode dedicated to portraits of Space Marines. And last but not least, the fourth episode will be a full demo of this Space Marine that I use here for the thumbnail. So where I displayed and show and put into work all the concepts and ideas that I talked about during the previous episodes. And yes, that's about it. I think it must be, I'm not sure, but it might be in total, all the episodes together must be around 3.5 hours of content, which, if you think about it, is not that bad considering that it's for free. So yeah. So like I said, you are welcome. Carnivores, I will shut up now and let you talk, Marine. Super excited for this year's and congrats on finally realizing. Yeah, man. We're here to chat, so yeah, no problem. I'm very happy to talk to you guys. So yes, so like I was saying, I can explain a little bit more in depth my reasoning, or my, yeah, what motivated me to do this tutorial series. So as you might know by now, I have these 10 minutes left. So I'm a very big fan of 40K since I was a kid. And I'm especially obsessed with Space Marines. It's been like a faction, some characters that have fascinated me since then. And I have always been, and this is in general about the 40K universe, always been obsessed about trying to visualize and to conceptualize this crazy and mad verse in a light, in a realistic, or better put, like believable light, right? How would a real space marine be in real life, right? Uh, so that has been one of my weird nerdy obsessions. And of course this is a very personal and very subjective thing, but when I see a lot of fan art around, that they fail at managing to create believable space marines, and mostly because in one hand they lack certain insight into some, you could say, technical aspects to take in consideration, because they are technically very difficult characters to pull off. In my opinion, I think from all type of fiction characters there is, in my humble opinion, I think they are the absolute most difficult characters to represent correctly. They are very, very, very tricky. So that's in one hand, right? So people are really struggling. So I thought that, okay, so let's give some tips and to give some real understanding that might help people just to pull that technical block, so they can surpass it and do something better. And then there's the other part, which is maybe more subjective and more nerdy in a certain way, but it's like I get very frustrated when I see space marines that are done by somebody technically skilled, right? So good illustrations, good drawings or paintings, but they completely miss their depiction of the space marine because they absolutely don't understand these characters, right? And the fanatic nerd in me kind of like boils inside, in a harmless way, of course. I mean, to be honest, I'm ironically, after saying this, I have to say that I'm always very I always praise any type of fan art, being good or bad. I think it's fantastic that everybody wants to communicate and express their love for the 40K universe, and that's something to be praised. So nothing wrong there. But this like a grumpy fanatic nerd in me at the same time is just like, but why don't they do understand how real space marines are? So I decided, okay, so I that was another aspect that I decided, okay, I think jumping a little bit into that and kind of giving a little bit more insightful view about what is the role of an illustrator, and trying to be faithful to the narrative intent of the creation of certain characters or stories or environments or universes. So what you should be focusing and trying to be as faithful as possible. So basically that's kind of like the summary of my of my intentions behind doing this tutorial series. And again, with the hope of celebrating the fan and community around 40K, right? And trying to contribute in that way. So, of course, there might be people that think that the things that I say in the tutorials are just like nonsense. But hopefully, there will be some of you that think it is useful and insightful. And well, I I hope that at least some few people will enjoy it and get something out of it. Let's sorry, I just been talking and talking. I just completely missed the chat. Drogo, the craftsman. Wow, what a name. Jakub, hello, how are you? Thank you very much. Can't wait to see all the episodes. Well, I'm very happy to hear. Again, I put a ton of hard work and love into this for you guys and girls. So yeah, for everybody. So yeah, I'm very happy to hear. Tong Isaac tried to draw Marines by own effort a few times. I think I cannot capture the sense of veteran and cruelty of a Space Marine face in my failed attempts. Super excited. Well, great. Then you will find the third episode very useful. I hope. Pontus, hello Pontus. How are you? How are you, my friend? Jakub, faces you portray always remind me of the movie Blood of the Heroes. Rugged, scarred, augmented with blades, equal real. Yes. The third episode is gonna be for you, my friend. Let's see. Ooh, 4 minutes left. Fantastic. Well, I think when the episode start, I will just let it. I will just shut up, I guess, and let it go. Dinab, then we are all going to draw Space Marines. Yes, you will. Frédéric, hey, salut, comment ça va? Pontus, yeah, looking forward to watch the tutorials. You know me, yeah, Pontus, but you have gotten very, very good and yeah. So, but yeah, probably you will get something out of them for sure. F Catalan, very interested. I have started painting with oils on canvas. Ooh. And want to eventually paint a Space Marine like Velázquez would have painted to the horrors of my teacher. Yeah, I can see how could that be. But I would, well, if you do that, please make sure to share that on my Discord server. I absolutely would love to see that. I love that idea, regardless of what the teacher says. Tom Isaac, yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks. Well, you're welcome. Carnivores, I'm excited to see how you approach volumes. I feel like that is the real foundation of capturing realistic proportions, which is one of the hardest aspects, in my opinion. Yes, you nail it. The volumes is one of the trickiest aspects of the Space Marines, next to the proportions. So yeah, volumes and proportions are the absolute key and foundation to do a good Space Marine, and they are really tricky. Yeah. Frederic, nice. It's the great day. Yeah, it is. I'm very excited. 2 minutes left. I really hope that everything goes smooth and there's no problem and the subtitles work as well. If you are any Spanish or Polish speaking, then you will have the option to put it in Spanish. and in Polish. All right, 1 minute left. Drum beats. So yeah, thanks a lot everybody for joining. I really appreciate everybody just joining the live stream before the release of the episode. Really much appreciated. I really hope that you will enjoy it and get at least something out of it. And stay tuned for the next episodes. They will be released pretty soon. So yeah, thanks a lot. I'm just saying goodbye because I will just shut up. So as soon as it start. Yeah, Jakub, Polish. Yes. That's thanks to another great member of the community, Peter. Let's see. Sorry, Peter, for I cannot remember exactly your last name, but Ritzkowski. So yeah, Peter has done the Polish subtitles. So yeah, that's he's also awesome and very thankful for it. All right, so it should start now, I think. I guess it's something I have never done this, so it says Premiere will begin shortly. There you go. All right. Oh, there's a countdown of 5 minutes. All right. And we have 5 minutes left still. All right. Again, this is my absolute very first time I do this with any video, just putting up Premiere. Yeah. Good thing. Very well thought, Pontus. Yes, I think you couldn't share it. I will do it myself. Let's see. All right. There it goes. So that's the direct link to the video itself. So you can watch it on your own without having to go through the live stream. Oscar, so much anticipation. Well, no pressure for me. I'm very excited, but I'm also terrified because after such a long time talking about it and just spreading the word as much as I could everywhere, now now you are all gonna see it, and you might think it's crap. But yeah, anyway, I think it's gonna be good. Yeah, Juan Toledano, I think you are, yeah, that's the problem. But yeah, I just put the direct link there. So this is actually pretty cool. This feature of putting a countdown, I like it. It is a weird feeling, I have to say. Again, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself like a broken record, but yeah, it's been a very long time working with this, and quite a headache as well, even though I had a lot of fun doing it, and it's been a very nice experience. But I would be lying if I would say that it hasn't, if it would have gone without any kind of rough periods, and there have been quite some. So yeah, so it feels that it has been like a very long birth. Drogo, the pauldrons always mess me up. Trying to get them to side right since they are a thick. Yes, yeah, the cauldrons or the shoulder pads of doom. Yes. They are like yes, and I'm happy to say that I'm gonna be spending quite some time talking about them, and on the tutorial. Especially, I mean, I will be talking a little bit on this very first episode, but I will dive more into it in detail on the second episode, when I on the chapter dedicated to volumes of the Space Marine armor. But yeah, the pauldrons are an absolute nightmare. There are, yeah. That, yeah, again, that's why I call them the shoulder pads of doom. So, and you are not the only one. I struggle myself constantly with them as well, and that's something that I mentioned on the tutorial, is that I struggle quite a lot with Space Marines even to this day. So yeah, all right, it's almost there. All right, again, thanks a lot everybody for joining. I hope that you like it, and again, have fun. Hello, my name is Miguel Iglesias. I am a professional illustrator and concept artist, and I have been working in the entertainment industry with games, films, animation, and TV series for over 20 years now. Working for many different clients, like these ones, among many others, and this is the kind of work that I do. But if you are here, you may already know some of my previous works for Games Workshop and the universe of Warhammer 40,000. So I am delighted to welcome you to this in-depth tutorial where we will dive deep into the subject and creative process of how to paint and draw Space Marines.
The Emperor's Angels of Death.
Since the subject of this tutorial is quite large, it will be divided into several episodes, each one of them focused on a different aspect of the creative process of illustrating a Space Marine. It has taken me a very long time to finish it since I first announced it. It has been more than a year in the making, but as you will see, there is a lot of content and a huge amount of work was involved in creating this tutorial, especially considering I had to make it during my spare time. So at this point, I cannot express how happy I am to finally be able to share it with you. Yes. I hope you will enjoy it after all the hard work I put into it. And if you do, don't forget to give a like, subscribe, and activate the notifications as well. It certainly will help me quite a lot to grow the channel. Please do. Okay, so let's take a look at what you will gain from this tutorial. You will learn about the tricky proportions of a Space Marine and how it affects its construction, and you will get an understanding of the silhouette that defines the iconic look of a Space Marine. You will gain an understanding on the very challenging subject regarding the volumes of a Space Marine armor and its representation in different angles and perspectives. You will learn how to make a portrait of a Space Marine, gaining an understanding of their anatomical features and those relevant lore aspects to have in consideration when depicting them. You will learn tips on how to paint and draw Space Marines in dynamic poses. You will also learn the different ways to give personality to your Space Marine characters by adding depth, context, and story to your Space Marines. And last but not least, after this full series of tutorials, you will gain an understanding on the very important subject of how to engage the creative process itself with the right mindset and setting yourself some clear creative goals, which are the secret to succeed. To add the cherry on the cake, at the end of this series of tutorials, I will include one full demo of a character illustration of a Space Marine, going through and applying all the subjects and concepts seen throughout the tutorials and explaining my creative process. Jakub, no, they are not from Dawn of War. I also want to clarify here with a big disclaimer that everything I'm going to say in this tutorial is exclusively my opinion and my point of view, and in no way, shape or form I'm speaking on behalf of Games Workshop, nor do I claim to be the only and unique repository of truth on the matter, alright? Everything I'm going to show you is my personal opinion. But nevertheless, it is a personal opinion that comes not only from literally a lifelong fandom, but most importantly for the aim of this tutorial, it is an opinion that also comes from my experience as a professional artist working throughout the years for several official projects set in this universe, from cover illustrations for rulebooks and codexes for the original tabletop game to video games and other media. So in other words, from contributing to expand this universe creatively. I want to make sure you understand that I don't claim to know everything or to be the best at it, alright? I just want to share my view and my professional experience by creating this tutorial for you and the rest of the community. Alright, let's begin our journey into the Holy Emperor's arcane secrets on how to create the Adeptus Astartes, the mighty defenders of the Imperium of Man.
The Space Marines.
Okay, so this is chapter 1, having a strong foundation, lore, anatomy, and proportions. So before we get our hands dirty painting and drawing, we must talk about lore, context, and narrative. This is an essential aspect of the creative process that cannot be dismissed or overlooked by jumping directly into painting. So be patient, my young Padawan. Wrong universe. I mean, be patient, my young neophyte. Yeah, that was more fitting. Yes. Okay, so let's jump into business now. The reason why I want to talk about lore, context, and narrative before anything else, and why it is so important, is because in order to properly illustrate any subject, in this case the Space Marines from Warhammer 40k, it is fundamental that you understand its nature, narrative intent, and scope. In other words, you need to understand the original author or author's intentions when the subject at hand was created. You, as an illustrator, must understand on a deeper level the original material and help to communicate its narrative in a visual form. You need to be as faithful to the original material as possible. Of course, you are more than welcome to be free and reinterpret any subject as you want and not be limited by any constraints if you want to do it for yourself. After all, any artistic creation should be free. But in case you want to faithfully depict and illustrate any subject from the original material, you must take this very seriously and make it part of your creative process. In this case, as the conceptual foundation of the whole process. And if you are looking at this video, you are more than probably very familiar with the lore of Space Marines. But you need to understand that I am not trying to lecture you on the lore itself, but about the importance of starting the process of any illustrative work with the proper mindset. If you disregard this, you will end up with a product that misses the narrative intended for it,
and therefore fails to illustrate the subject at hand. So, when I start any illustration, I try my best to understand in a deep way what I am going to depict. If it is a character from a novel, for example, I will read that novel instead of only reading a physical description of that character. That way, I can understand the history, motivation, personality, and any subtle nuances into the character's psychology. I will try my best to understand the context in which this character lives through and what role does it play in the story for narrative purposes. In other words, I will do my homework and do proper research. If not, the result will most probably become dull and shallow in the best case scenario. I felt compelled to talk about this during this tutorial because I see a lot of artists struggling to illustrate Space Marines in this way, failing to illustrate faithfully the context and narrative nature of these characters, and by doing so failing to portray a real Space Marine. And again, this is not a problem of lack of technical skills in many cases, but of narrative display. For example, there are plenty of artists who have good technical skills and their renditions abilities are good, but they still fail to do a good job depicting the true nature of Space Marines because their depictions fall far from the original material and scope. One of my favorite examples of this that comes to mind is the depictions of Space Marines with faces that look like young male models, with immaculate skins and delicate features. I will not show any examples though, since I don't want to start shaming people here, but I am sure you know what I mean. And of course, we could argue that many of these things comes to personal interpretation and will vary from artist to artist and their personal narrative preferences and styles, which is totally true and fine. So I can totally agree that there is plenty of room for diverse interpretations and multitude of narrative and creative angles from which this can be done, and still remain true to the original nature of the characters. This is, after all, a creative activity, right? But okay, after clarifying this part, if what you want to do is to depict Space Marines in a way that remains faithful to their nature in the lore and their general narrative, you must take in consideration that lore and context of these characters in the universe of Warhammer 40k and work within those parameters so they fit in. Alright, let's put some context and lore about Space Marines so we can all be on the same page. Space Marines are iconic characters in this universe of Warhammer 40k. A very dark, violent, grim, and to some extent terrifying fiction universe set in a science fiction far future, but still within our reality. So this aspect should be one important pillar in your foundation when depicting a Space Marine, since they are such an iconic symbol for this setting. So, in this grim and dark setting, Space Marines are supposed to be transhuman, meaning humans in origin that have been transformed through genetic modifications, surgical processes, psycho conditioning, and an insane training into a warrior caste with superhuman abilities, resistance, physical and mental capabilities that are able to live hundreds of years. So even though they have a human origin and still have many human aspects and traits remaining on them, they are something completely different. And this is something important that you need to think about them when working on your illustrations of Space Marines. They are the ultimate defenders of humanity. Their sole purpose and meaning in life is literally to die fighting against the enemies of the Imperium of Man. So there is a fundamental, heroic and epic tone to these characters, but they also carry a tragic and grim tone on them as well. We could say that in short, this description defines in a nutshell their nature and the setting they live in. with some very clear outlines and directions, but still leaving us with a very wide and big array of narrative options to focus on. For example, giving you the choice to focus on one hand on the heroic side of the characters, or on the other hand, to focus instead on the tragic side they also share. Within this setting, if we go with an extreme example, it would not work, let's say, trying to portray a very joyful, laid-back, and easygoing space marine with a colorful personality whose sole purpose in life is to promote peace, love, and compassion to all creatures in the galaxy. Let's say to embrace and promote the creation of a loving and caring multiracial galaxy family. So regardless of the appeal of this take on the character, it would be certainly moving away from the true nature of a space marine. Even if it could be argued that for some very weird and unlikely reason, an extreme deviation could occur within the lore to explain this outrageous example, still, it would certainly be moving away from the true nature of a space marine in the setting of Warhammer 40,000.
Right.
And therefore fail at depicting a space marine, right? And still, I have to say this marine is pretty cool.
Okay, he's a cutie
so
for
now
sure.
that this important and necessary part is clear, we can jump to talk about the anatomy and proportions of space marines and the best way to represent them. While I talk, I will be showing you in the background the process of creating a rough sketch of a space marine that I will use as a basic template to
now
talk
we
and
get
explain
into
about their
real
anatomy,
business.
proportions, and iconic silhouette. So, space marines are, in my opinion, one of the most challenging and difficult fiction characters to represent that exist out there. That is why it is not surprising that people struggle with them. And if you are one of them, you are not alone.
And yes, I
Trust me.
completely forgot there is the
Myself
mirror
also struggle with
tool
that.
on
And I
Photoshop
failed multiple times in my career to make
when
a
doing
correct
this.
prediction.
Silly me. But yeah.
Extremely easy to make mistakes if one does not pay very much attention during the creation process. One of those aspects that makes people struggle a lot representing space marines is their proportions and general understanding of their base anatomy. I also want to add, before we continue, that everything I'm going to show you in relation to anatomy and proportions is approximate, since there is no exact established canon. Everything turns around very vague descriptions that indicate a direction to follow, but leaves a lot of room for interpretation. Therefore, different artists' depictions of space marines do vary depending on their own vision and style. So what I'm going to show you is my vision and thoughts regarding this subject, okay? So, like we have already talked about, space marines are supposed to be the result of a very hardcore and intense process of genetical engineering that change and shapes their physical and mental frame to a very high degree. With this in mind, when confronted with the challenge of how to represent their anatomy and proportions, it is important to start considering them as non-humans. When painting them, you should stop thinking of them just as very strong men with kick-ass armor and weapons, but as beings that are no longer human. That is why they are sometimes referred as transhumans in the lore. This is important not only to avoid ending up with a character that looks like a normal dude wearing a space marine armor, but also to help you understand their extremely bulky anatomical construction. To such an extreme, one could even say they have a deformed anatomy. One of the most common mistakes people make when painting space marines is that they take the miniatures from the tabletop game as references for their proportions. The miniatures could be a good source of references for certain aspects and details, but it comes with its own problems. And the biggest of them is that the proportions of the miniatures are not what a real space marine would look like in the real world. With the miniatures being very small, Games Workshop have to make certain alterations to the proportions of the miniatures for details to be visible. Those normally are the size of the heads, the overall proportions including the lengths of legs and hands, but also vents, panel lines, and details like bolts and other details in general like weapons, etc. etc.
Yeah,
So
Droggle,
please,
Photoshop.
don't use
Yeah.
miniatures for proportions references since they are basically small toys with totally unrealistic proportions. So for that matter, it is important to have some aspects in consideration. First, their scale. Space Marines are big. They stand more or less between 7 to 9 feet tall on average, or in meters around 2 to 3 meters tall. If you have a regular human in your picture, the Space Marine should tower over them. That being said, if we want to be picky, I should point out that these numbers are just an average. As with real humans, there is no set in stone proportions or unique proportion, and there can be many variations between individuals to some extent. There are plenty of accounts of Space Marines taller, shorter, or bulkier than average, needing special modifications to their armor to accommodate their bodies. But we will keep things simple and work on the average proportions, so don't worry. Okay, now we have a rough sketch showing how an average Space Marine should look proportion-wise. At this point, it is very important to understand one aspect of these proportions and why they work from a realistic point of view. An aspect, by the way, related to another common mistake people make when painting Space Marines, where the Space Marines may end up looking more like robots. So this is it. When painting a Space Marine in armor, it is very important to consider and understand that inside the armor there is supposed to be somebody wearing it, and therefore sufficient space within the armor for the body of the wearer. And I may be sounding like Captain Obvious here, but you would be surprised how many times I see examples of Space Marines depictions where if they would be stripped from their armor, what would be underneath would be the body of an extremely thin and malnourished person with extreme anorexia. Okay, let's paint another rough sketch, this time of a naked Space Marine within the armor to show how he would fit inside. And yes,
Steven Sundin, yeah,
like me out
more or
there,
less.
without showing the black carapace, since the focus here is to show the anatomy and muscles.
I will talk about that in a minute.
Something you will immediately notice is that a normal person would not fit inside. Only an individual of extreme size and bulkiness. Here is where it comes to place the realization that the anatomy of a Space Marine is not the same of an average human, having a disproportionate big chest and width from shoulder to shoulder. Once again, one could even say that a regular Space Marine is quite deformed compared to a normal human's anatomy. Another problem people commonly fall into is displaying the proportions and different elements of the armor in a way that would make the person wearing the armor impossible to move, or if by doing so resulting in breaking its limbs. When painting and imagining the armor of a Space Marine, not only you must think that a body needs to fit inside, but also how each element is placed in relation to the other parts, so the person inside can actually move around with ease. We will look at this issue more in detail during the chapter dedicated to posing Space Marines, but it is also relevant to mention it at this point in relation to their proportions. Okay, now I may hear some of you asking why should you even care about how the Space Marines really looks from inside without the armor?
Jakub, yes.
Since you will paint them for 99% of the time in armor. Well, the reason for that is that when illustrating anything, but in this case Space Marines, you need to have a deep understanding of how its different elements work together, their function, context with each other, etc. etc. If not, you will end up trying to reproduce Space Marines by copying and replicating visual cues from their forms, shapes and proportions, but with no context and relation with each other, resulting in disconnected elements that don't fit together and look like some kind of mismatched collage. To give you an example outside the subject of Space Marines, regarding human anatomy, it works in the exact same way. To represent anatomy properly in your art, you must have a deep understanding of what the proportions of a person are, how much they can vary, its musculature and bone structures, and how everything works, moves, and interacts with each other as a system and not just as separate elements isolated from the rest. Let's put a practical example with our Space Marine. A very common and classic depiction of Space Marines is representing them without a helmet, with their heads exposed. This is one of those instances where knowing and understanding their anatomy comes very handy. The difficulty here lies in deciding the size of the head in relation to the rest of the body in armor. Since there is no other point of reference to compare it with, if you don't understand on a fundamental level their anatomy, you can end up making some classic mistakes. Mistakes that are very easy to do if you don't pay attention. And once again,
As far as I
myself
know,
have
Space Marines
failed
are
many
males.
times with this. One of these classic mistakes is this one. Can you notice what's the problem? Yes, the head is too small in relation to the armored body. Maybe it is not that obvious, but when you strip naked the poor Space Marine, it becomes evident that the head is way smaller for such a huge body, even for a Space Marine. Looks like one of those small-headed characters from Beetlejuice film.
Yes, I'm that old.
Another classic mistake is like this other example. Do you notice what is the problem? In this case, one may argue that this time the Space Marine looks very proportionate since those proportions are the ones of a normal person. If we strip naked the Space Marine, once again, you will notice that the proportions and the ratio from head to the rest of the body is closer to a normal human, aside from the deformed musculature of course. So, what is the problem then? Well, the problem is that considering this size of a head, you would need an equally big helmet so he can wear it. And if we provide our Space Marines with a fitting helmet, that helmet would be too big in relation to the rest of the armor proportions. Can you see that? This is a very common mistake when considering helmets. Once again, you must think there needs to be enough space inside for a head. If you paint a helmet of the size of a head, that would mean that the head inside will be tiny in order to fit inside. Any helmet must and will necessarily increase the diameter of the head's volume unless it is paper thin, of course, which is not the case. So, in any case, if you find yourself at some point doubting or lost regarding the size of a Space Marine compared to a normal person, the one element you should use for comparison is the size of the head, since it would be almost the same in both cases. Let's compare now our naked Space Marine with a normal human. Even with a person looking like this, bigger and way more muscular than the average man, more as a bodybuilder, the differences are obvious and you can start grasping how different the Space Marine's anatomy is. The only element that will give you a good measure of the proportions is the size of the head, which once again, even if a little larger than the average human in the Space Marine, it is still almost the same for this purpose. If we were to resize the normal human to the same stature of the Space Marine, we would end up like this. Resulting once again not only with the problem of having a head that needs a huge helmet in relation with the body armor, but that also has a body that doesn't fit comfortably inside the armor, since his body mass is not wide enough. Even when scaled up, the normal human would be thinner overall than a space marine. Okay, so now that we have looked at the basics of a space marine anatomy and proportions, let's look at another relevant aspect that defines the iconic look of an
Hi,
Adeptus
Carnivorous.
Astartes.
Take care, man. Thanks for
And
joining.
that is the overall silhouette and outline of their armor. Using my rough sketch as reference, I will use it to compare it against some of the most common mistakes I see around so you can avoid them. Of course, some of these features in the armor silhouettes and volumes may vary a little depending on the model of the armor at hand, since there are quite many, but for the sake of simplicity, I will be focusing on the overall features shared in most of the cases by all models. Let's begin with the width of the torso. The Space Marines are supposed to be extremely bulky and heavy, and I see many times depictions where the torso, and especially the waist area, have been depicted too narrow. You need to avoid this, because it removes the sense of power and heaviness that defines a Space Marine. Another common mistake is the one regarding the legs. And not surprising, because they are quite tricky to depict in a good way. The main problem I see is that people tend to paint them either too thick and or too straight. The problem with that is that it creates a strong sense of stiffness of the character and it unbalances the visual weight of the silhouette. The legs should be curved following the shape of the thighs in a very subtle way. That will help to break that stiff look to them. It is tricky though, because it is a very small and tiny difference, but that small detail results in making a huge difference in how you perceive the silhouette of the character. Another mistake concerning the legs is an over-exaggerated and oversized shape of the lower legs. I call these the Space Marines disco pants. And this is extremely common, by the way. And once again, it is understandable since the lower legs are slightly bigger and in some armor models even bigger, especially if you look at the miniatures. And this is one of those cases that we talked about in the beginning regarding the reinterpretation of the miniatures, if we want to depict these characters under a light of realism. In this case, these oversized shapes makes them look very cartoony and gives them a very toy-like look. Something you want to avoid if your goal is to present a realistic, serious, dark and grim character.
It is Drogo, but it makes
If your
a
goal is to make a
huge
realistic
difference.
and plausible illustration of a Space Marine, you cannot just replicate one-on-one the miniatures, but reinterpret them in a way that makes them look believable and relatable. Let's turn our attention now to the arms. Another common mistake I see around is making the arms way too thick, resulting in a very awkward shaped arm where the hands result in comparison ridiculously tiny. Not to mention the moronic result in the design of the armor from a defensive point of view, since it would mean from this angle having a huge gap between the wrist armor and gauntlet asking to be filled with bullets. The arms should be thick enough to have space for the muscular arm of the Space Marine to fit inside, but it should stay tight as well to provide good protection. Also pay attention to the fact that the elbow should be located slightly under the edge of the shoulder pads, and that the area of the biceps will be mostly covered by it. And finally, let's take a look at the bane of all fun artists. The one single element in the armor that will make you sweat blood and give you shivers and nightmares at night. Of course, I'm talking about the Space Marines'
Shoulder pads of doom.
Alright. The thing is that the shoulder pads are without question the most challenging element to paint about the Space Marine armor. In order to represent them properly, it is extremely important to understand its shapes and you need to be very meticulous when representing them. Even from a straight angle from the side and front, you must be careful and reproduce the shape properly. But of course, the real challenge of the shoulder pads come when you start looking at them from different angles and perspectives. So, these are some of the most common mistakes I see around. Sometimes they are painted too small, like this. Other times it goes to the other extreme and become way too big. Some other times I see them presented stretching too thin toward the top. The thing is that shoulder pads have a very particular volume and shape and are one of the key elements that identify and define the iconic look of a Space Marine. So, no pressure. That is why you must be able to paint or draw them correctly. Like I said previously, the true challenge comes when painting them in a more dynamic pose and how they interact with their volumes with the rest of the body. But we will look at this more closely during next episode dedicated to dynamic posing of Space Marines. And that is all for this first episode on how to paint Space Marines. In this episode, we looked at the basics of Space Marines' anatomy and proportions and the understanding of the narrative necessary to represent the Angels of Death in a realistic and plausible way. I hope you enjoyed this first episode. Once again, I cannot state enough how happy I am that I could finally share with you all, since it took me more than a year of hard work, love and passion to do it during my spare time. If you did enjoy it, give it a like, share the video and subscribe for more and to help me grow the channel.
Yes, do.
And most importantly, if you like my work, consider supporting me on Patreon, so I can spend more time creating quality content for the channel here on YouTube, and to support the creation of my own awesome grim dark sci-fi project about space pirates,
Oh yeah.
called The Brothering of the Clouds, that you will have the opportunity to be part of by becoming a patron, on top of all the extra goodies of each tier. You will find a direct link to my Patreon down below in the description section. Stay tuned for the next episode, where we will look at the tricky volumes of a Space Marine armor and how to reproduce them, and how to bring to life your Space Marines.
All right. Well, again, thanks a lot everybody for joining.
Have a good one, and next time. Bye-bye.
An absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate it. I hope that you enjoyed it and learned something out of it. And yes, have a nice weekend, everybody. Now I'm gonna go and take the dog out for a walk. All right, take care, everybody, and see you on Tuesday for the common live stream. Have a good day, and again, thanks for joining. You are the best. Bye bye.